Cody Stoots live from the NFL Combine. Landry Locker live from H-Town. The Combine has begun. We're 2 weeks away from free agency. Latest edition of Sign or Decline. And we were talking about this guy during the trade deadline, Chase Young. Should the Texans sign Chase Young? I'll let you start, Stoots. I got takes on Chase Young. I think that things have kind of changed from the trade deadline to now, though.
Things have changed so much for Chase Young from where he was a couple of years ago when I thought he was going to end up being one of the best players in all of football. And I know you and I had some conversations back in the day about him, about how we wouldn't even trade some quarterbacks for him. And then the injuries happened. This year he turned into a trade chip at the deadline, which doesn't always bode well for your overall value in the NFL. But then in the Super Bowl, he has a pretty nice Super Bowl. So like there's something there. And maybe it's because Chase Young is a former top pick that I give him a little bit more benefit of the doubt, that I still have hope that something's in there. And every time he gets further and further away from the injury, I still feel better and better about the chance that elite talent that got him drafted so high is still there. But that's probably one of the hardest evaluations for teams here in free agency, is figuring out exactly what Chase Young is and what he can be for however long you'd be interested in signing him. Because I've got to imagine Chase Young, he looks at all his Washington teammates, who all of them, Allen and Payne and Sweat, all have big contracts. I got to think he's big contract hunting as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's going to get what he wants to hunt for. I think it might be a very humbling experience for Chase Young. I mean, that you're the number 2 overall pick. There's talk about Chase Young or Joe Burrow. You start out well, you're the defensive rookie of the year, then you have the injuries, then you have the questions about the motor and stuff. I know we've heard his dad call into radio stations to defend his honor. You don't get your 5th-year option picked up. You get traded to San Francisco. Don't really break out. There's people in San Francisco that were kind of questioning the effort there as well. Maybe the right coach would be able to get it out of him. That's the one thing I wonder. Like, would D'Amico Ryans look at Chase Young and say, I can get something out of this guy? I just think that Chase Young is not going to get some sort of multi-year deal. I do wonder, and maybe we can have this conversation on the back end. I wonder if Chase Young is heading towards kind of a Jadeveon Clowney lifestyle and playing style, where every year you're on the market, you're still making 10, 11, whatever $1 million a year, but you're going from team to team, and you're never really able to quite get that long-term deal. I do wonder if, like, Jadeveon Clowney, who's made a nice career for himself. Jadeveon Clowney's actually coming off a hell of a season where he played every single game and had 9.5 sacks. And that might be another guy we want to discuss if he's going to hit the market, especially with all the money that the Ravens are going to have to pay. And they just announced, I think they're going to franchise tag Matabike and maybe figure something out. But I could see, and this isn't a bad thing, I could see Chase Young heading towards a situation where at the very least he's going to have to sign a short-term deal if he wants to get the big bread and at least prove that he can put together a season similar or even better than the one that he did in year one. I think he might be heading towards Clowney territory.
That's where he gets really intriguing for me, actually, is when he is mercenary Chase Young, and it's a 1-year commitment to Chase Young, and it gives the Texans an opportunity to bridge to the future, or if they feel like, hey, this is the type of player we're going to get year in, year out, you can make that level of investment in Chase Young. He strikes me as the type of guy that if he's not getting that long-term deal, he'd love to turn a really good single season into a long-term deal and do everything he could to avoid what you talked about, which is that Jadeveon Clowney scenario. And if that's the Chase Young that you're getting, that super motivated, I've got to play really well and not just get stats because coaches will watch it and know that maybe I'm freelancing or this or that, but him with D'Amico Ryans, this style of defense, the other defenders that would be on the defensive line with him, the cost and the commitment that you would make to him, I'm pretty intrigued in the mercenary version of Chase Young. There's still something there, and I just feel like, we all thought Chase Young and Baby Bosa together were going to be just incredible. And, I mean, maybe there was a Steve Wilkes element to it in addition to the fact that Chase Young just couldn't put in 100% all the time. I don't get the vibe that anybody's slacking under D'Amico Ryans. Ryans may be the perfect coach for Chase Young for that mercenary role where he has to show off and play really well, but also play as a part of the defensive line unit, not just freelance and try to get himself, double-digit sacks to go get a big deal.
That's my case for. I have no problem being used. Like if you want to use the Texans in this situation to establish yourself and get the momentum back for your career, and he's still a young player. He's still very, very young. I've actually always liked his makeup from Ohio State and stuff. I still believe in the young man. I just don't think he's going to get big money. But if Chase Young wanted to sign a short-term deal and use the Texans and add an element to them where it's basically a replacement for Jonathan Grenard, maybe even a cheaper replacement for Jonathan Grenard, for all I know, I have no problem with the number 2 overall pick coming to Houston and using them and them benefiting from it and it being a two-way thing. I love that type of situation. I love the Texans are even in a situation where if this is the case, that the Texans would be able to do that. And maybe that's something that happens late in the process, right? Once the market speaks and all these edge guys go out and see what they can get. But I would be 100% on board. And if D'Amico Ryans is willing to bring Chase Young in, then that means he sees something. I know today you're at the NFL Combine. He said, I look at person over player. I always take a person over a player. I've never heard anything like bad about Chase Young, like people at Ohio State. I haven't heard anything bad about him. So I do wonder if D'Amico Ryans looks at this as kind of a project Matt Burke, and they say, hey, come use us. Let's reach that potential. We'll help you out. You help us out. We'll help you out.
Let me start firing off contract terms, and you stop me when it gets uncomfortable. 1 year, $9 million. 1 year, $10 million.
Yes.
1 year, $12 million.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that's about kind of what I'm thinking. 12.
Clowney, and that's the Clowney range right there.
Yeah, like anywhere from 8 to 12, 12 and a half. Like I'm pretty interested in that. Like that's a worthwhile commitment to maybe get.
That's a Sheldon Rankins type of deal, and that's like a Clowney type of deal.
Like imagine if the Texans had 2 double-digit sack guys off the edge next year. Like Will Anderson, jumps up to 13, 14 sacks, and Chase Young gets you 11 or 12. And Young probably moves on after that because you're going to long-term invest in Will Anderson, who D'Amico Ryans called, like a foundational piece for this organization. But 2024 is an important year. It's one of the few years where you have the financial advantage of CJ Stroud and Will Anderson not making a tremendous amount of money. Why not have a mercenary or two on this defense or even on the offense to get things done?
Yeah, I'm good with it. The case against would just be, is he going to get a long-term deal? I would say no. I don't think Chase Young is going to get a long-term deal. I don't think he's going to break bread. I don't think he took full advantage of the situation in San Francisco. I think there's still some question marks about the player, but I think it would just come down to price and what the price is going to be for Chase Young, and what he sees as the ideal fit and what teams see for him. So the case against for me, it just comes down to bread.
Yeah, it's as far as the Texans go, a long-term commitment in Chase Young would seem very peculiar unless they absolutely just had a complete and total idea that nobody else had. He is very much in the try-it-out phase with his next team, unless a team with a lot of cap space wants to pay him something stupid for a couple of years, betting that he is going to bounce back and they're going to have a cheap asset for a couple of seasons after this one. But I've got no interest in really anything past a 1 year deal.
Yeah,
so
that's his projection on Spot Rack. It's 1 year, 13.
Yeah, so if he wants a 2 year, 24, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm not interested, and it would be interesting to know how D'Amico Ryans, we haven't had to hear about this yet, how D'Amico Ryans would handle maybe a locker room malcontent. I believe he'd be able to handle it pretty well. I also just, with as much as those defensive linemen talk about how great they were together and how cohesive they were on and off the field, I also don't love the idea of a guy that maybe has his dauber down because in the middle of the year he's only got 2 sacks being in the defensive line room. So that's the reverse part of the mercenary is, hey, not only is he out of here at the end of the year, but now he's, PO'd in the middle of the season because he's not producing and he's not going to get paid at the end of the year. Do you get the best player out of that? So I'm out on a long-term deal, and it seems like a risky investment past that 1 year where you could just get rid of him.
The projection's 1 year 13. I'm going to bring it to someone who's projected for half that. Jadeveon Clowney right now, 1 year 7 is the spot rack in investment. Now we know very well about Jadeveon Clowney, but last year he was damn good. Played all 17 games, 9.5 sacks, which tied a career high. We know how reckless he is in the run game. Again, that we've dealt with. It feels like we've been talking about Jadeveon Clowney hypotheticals for, better part of a half a decade. And, could it go full circle? Should the Texans look into Clowney? I think Chase Young's kind of the new Clowney. He's a little bit more expensive. For me, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm not opposed to one of these guys using you. But at this point with Clowney, it just kind of feels more like treading water as opposed to Chase Young perhaps being a little bit more expensive, but a little younger, a little more upside, and really a little bit more to play for because Jadeveon Clowney, he's established this lifestyle of, hey, I'm not even going to go to training camp. Right. Maybe twice in the last 7 years or whatever. And then I'm going to show up, I'm going to play, and we'll figure some stuff out. So I wouldn't be opposed to Clowney, especially at that deal, and especially with what he did last year. If you had that opposite Will Anderson, I know you had Grenard last year, but if you had that, I think you would live with it. But I would be more into the Chase Young, younger, mid-20s, kick the tires on that.
Yeah, I just feel like the potential for mercenary Chase Young in this defense is a lot higher than mercenary Jadeveon Clowney. And look, D'Amico Ryans is the right coach for Jadeveon Clowney. And you hear about some of the stuff that, Bill O'Brien and Jadeveon Clowney didn't quite get along, and, sleeping in the facility, wasn't practicing hard. None of that under D'Amico Ryans. And look, Clowney, for all we know, model citizen for the Baltimore Ravens. That's John Harbaugh. That's a respected big-time coach. So, he was on his P's and Q's with the Ravens. And I would think that he takes that show on the road and showcases it to another Ravens-like team that needs to maybe take that leap, and he goes to one of those teams. But I don't believe that'd be the Texans. I'd be much more comfortable with Chase Young as the mercenary.
More expensive, we'll see. And again, Jonathan Grenard's kind of the starting point. What is the market going to say to Jonathan Grenard? So the verdict for me with Chase Young, if we're talking 1 year, $12 million, I'm okay with it. I mean, I guess I'll say sideways. Yeah. I'm okay with it. It would be a matter of, does D'Amico Ryans want? If D'Amico Ryans does his homework on Chase Young and he feels that he can get the most out of him, I'm very much in favor of that, because I think the idea of having someone use you, I like the way they're developing guys, but I want to get to a point where, the guys that are going to sign the 1 year deals just to go out there and ball are coming to Houston. We saw it last year with Sheldon Rankins. Who knows what happens with him? I would look at Chase Young as another version of that. A lot of unrealized potential and a hell of a lot of reason to come in and show that he can play his best ball in an organization where the arrow appears to be going up. So I would be okay with Chase Young, especially if it's going to be a 1 year deal for that money. I would be good with it.
Yeah, we've established the thumb sideways for deals that would be okay with the player and deals that we wouldn't be okay. So thumb sideways for me as well. And to give the folks a little peek behind the curtain, a conversation that you and I had on the phone about Chase Young is the genesis behind sign or decline and the phrase of the day.
Yes, it is. Appreciate everyone for coming through. What do you think? Do you think the Texans should sign Chase Young? Should they bring back a familiar face in Jadeveon Clowney? Cody Stoots is live at the NFL Combine. Nick Caserio, we heard him speak earlier today. We'll hear what Nick Caserio had to say. I'll react to that a little bit later in the night. Check out Cody's work on Houston football, and business is picking up. Nick Caserio dropped a hell of a lot of clues today. We heard some from D'Amico yesterday. We heard some from Caserio today as well. Sign or decline. This has been the latest episode. Appreciate you for coming through. Tomorrow, we're going to go back to that wide receiver position, little veteran that could kill two birds with one stone. Appreciate you for coming through. Be sure to subscribe, like. Thanks for coming through and joining us in the latest edition of Sign or Decline.